Tech Tombstone, Kazaa made piracy easy until record labels sued it to death. Picture this. It's 2001, Napster just got shut down by court order, and 30 million music pirates are suddenly homeless. Enter Kazaa, a peer-to-peer file-sharing network that would make Napster look like a quaint neighborhood record swap. Founded by Estonian developers Ahti Heinla, Priit Kasasalu, and John Tallinn, Kazaa promised something revolutionary: truly decentralized file sharing that couldn't be killed by shutting down central servers. Within 2 years, it became the most downloaded software in history with over 400 million downloads worldwide. But Kazaa had a dirty secret that would define an entire generation's relationship with free software. Every download came bundled with so much malware, adware, and spyware that installing Kazaa was like inviting a digital plague into your computer. The software included brilliant digital entertainment tracking software, Altnet's content delivery system, and a rotating cast of browser hijackers that would redirect your searches, flood you with pop-up ads, and report your browsing habits back to marketing companies. By 2003, security researchers estimated that Kazaa installed an average of 12 separate pieces of unwanted software with each installation. Users didn't care because Kazaa delivered on its core promise: unlimited access to virtually any song, movie, or software ever created, all completely free. The technology behind Kazaa was genuinely brilliant and would later influence everything from Bitcoin to BitTorrent. Unlike Napster's centralized architecture, Kazaa used a fast-track protocol that created a distributed network of supernodes, essentially turning the most powerful computers on the network into mini-servers. This meant that shutting down Kazaa would require taking down hundreds of thousands of individual computers rather than a few central servers. The system was so robust that it could theoretically survive even if 90% of its nodes went offline. Dutch programmers Nicholas Zenstrom and Janus Friis, who later founded Skype, purchased the rights to Fast Track and began licensing it to various file-sharing applications, with Kazaa becoming the flagship product. By 2003, Kazaa was processing over 2 billion file transfers per month and consuming more bandwidth than the entire World Wide Web. The average Kazaa user shared over 400 files, creating a vast digital library that included not just the latest hit singles, but rare live recordings, out-of-print albums, foreign films, and software that cost thousands of dollars. For many users, particularly in developing countries where CDs could cost a week's wages, Kazaa represented their first real access to Western popular culture. But all this free content came at a steep price that went far beyond malware infections. The music industry was hemorrhaging money as CD sales plummeted from $14.6 billion in 1999 to $11.5 billion in 2003. The Recording Industry Association of America declared war on file sharing, launching thousands of lawsuits against individual users with damages that could reach hundreds of thousands of dollars per case. In September 2003, the RIAA filed its first wave of lawsuits against 261 Kazaa users, including a 12-year-old girl who settled for $2,000 and a 71-year-old grandfather who didn't even know what file sharing was. The lawsuits created a climate of fear, but they also generated massive publicity that drove even more people to Kazaa. By 2004, independent research showed that over 60% of American internet users had downloaded music illegally, with Kazaa being the most popular platform by far. The software was particularly popular on college campuses, where high-speed internet connections made downloading entire discographies a matter of hours rather than days. Some universities reported that Kazaa traffic was consuming up to 60% of their total bandwidth, forcing them to implement special blocking software just to keep their networks functional. The entertainment industry fought back with increasingly desperate measures that revealed just how threatened they felt by peer-to-peer technology. Record labels began flooding Kazaa with fake files, uploading thousands of corrupted or mislabeled songs designed to frustrate users and waste their time. These spoofed files might contain 30 seconds of the requested song followed by silence, or they might be completely different songs with incorrect titles. By some estimates, up to 40% of popular songs on Kazaa were fake by 2004. The movie industry went even further, hiring specialized companies to launch denial-of-service attacks against suspected pirates and to distribute files that claimed to be popular movies, but actually contained warnings about copyright infringement. Media Defender, one such company, employed over 100 people whose full-time job was to pollute peer-to-peer networks with junk data. The arms race between pirates and content owners became increasingly sophisticated, with Kazaa users developing reputation systems to identify trusted sources, while entertainment companies created elaborate fake personas to avoid detection. Meanwhile, Kazaa's corporate structure was deliberately designed to frustrate law enforcement and dodge legal responsibility. The software was officially owned by Sharman Networks, an Australian company, but the intellectual property belonged to various offshore entities in Estonia, the Netherlands, and Vanuatu. When investigators tried to trace ownership, they found a maze of shell companies and licensing agreements that made it nearly impossible to determine who was actually responsible for the software. This corporate hide-and-seek game worked for several years, but it couldn't prevent the inevitable reckoning. In 2005, the Australian Federal Court ruled that Sharman Networks had knowingly facilitated copyright infringement and ordered the company to pay 30 million Australian dollars in damages. More importantly, the court ordered Kazaa to implement keyword filtering that would prevent users from sharing copyrighted content. The filtering system was crude and easily circumvented, but it marked the beginning of the end for Kazaa's golden age. Users began migrating to newer platforms like LimeWire and BitTorrent, which offered better performance and fewer restrictions. The technical problems that had always plagued Kazaa became impossible to ignore as the user experience deteriorated. The software was notoriously unstable, with searches that returned random results, downloads that would mysteriously stop at 99% completion, and an interface that was bloated with advertising and promotional content. But the malware problem was what ultimately drove many users away. Installing Kazaa meant accepting that your computer would be slower, less reliable, and constantly bombarded with unwanted advertisements. The bundled software was so aggressive that many antivirus programs began flagging Kazaa itself as malware. Kazaa Media Desktop, the primary version of the software, installed a program called Gain Ad Server that was virtually impossible to remove and would continue serving advertisements even after users uninstalled Kazaa. The company did offer a clean version called Kazaa Plus for a monthly subscription fee, but this felt like extortion to users who were already providing the content that made the network valuable. Security researchers demonstrated that Kazaa's malware could steal passwords, credit card numbers, and personal files, turning every installation into a potential security breach. The final blow came not from lawsuits or technical problems, but from the simple fact that better alternatives had emerged. BitTorrent, developed by programmer Bram Cohen, offered faster downloads and a cleaner user experience without the malware baggage that plagued Kazaa. iTunes and other legal music services were finally offering reasonably priced alternatives that were easier and safer than piracy. By 2006, Kazaa's user base had collapsed from its peak of over 4 million simultaneous users to fewer than 1 million. The network effect that had made Kazaa valuable worked in reverse, as fewer users meant fewer available files, which drove away even more users. Desperate to stay relevant, Sharman Networks partnered with legitimate content providers to offer legal downloads, but users weren't interested in paying for content on a platform they associated with free piracy. The rebranded Kazaa legal service was a commercial failure, generating minimal revenue while requiring expensive licensing deals with record labels who remained deeply suspicious of the company's motives. Legal pressures continued to mount even as Kazaa's relevance faded. In 2006, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in MGM Studios vs. Grokster that peer-to-peer companies could be held liable for copyright infringement if they actively encouraged illegal activity. This ruling made Kazaa's business model legally untenable in the United States, its largest market. The company agreed to pay over $100 million in settlements with the recording industry and committed to transforming into a legal service, but it was too little, too late. The Kazaa brand was permanently associated with malware, piracy, and legal troubles. In 2012, the original Kazaa network was finally shut down permanently, ending more than a decade of operation. By then, most internet users had moved on to streaming services like Spotify and Netflix, making the entire concept of downloading individual files seem quaint and outdated. The legacy of Kazaa is complicated and contradictory. On one hand, it democratized access to culture in ways that were genuinely revolutionary, giving millions of people access to music, movies, and software that would have otherwise been financially out of reach. Many artists credit Kazaa with helping them discover new music and expand their creative horizons. The platform was particularly important in developing countries, where it served as a bridge to global popular culture. On the technical side, Kazaa's innovations in distributed networking laid the groundwork for many technologies we use today, including blockchain networks, content delivery systems, and peer-to-peer communication platforms. The fast-track protocol's resilience inspired later developments in decentralized computing that power everything from cryptocurrency to distributed file storage. Several of Kazaa's founders went on to create other groundbreaking technologies, most notably Skype, which used similar peer-to-peer principles to revolutionize voice communication. But Kazaa's dark legacy is equally important and longer-lasting. It taught an entire generation that free software comes with hidden costs, usually in the form of compromised security and privacy. The platform's bundled malware was so pervasive that it shaped how people thought about software installations for years to come. Many of the aggressive advertising and data collection practices that users first encountered through Kazaa became standard across the internet, normalizing surveillance capitalism before that term even existed. The legal precedents established through Kazaa lawsuits continue to influence copyright enforcement today, and the platform's relationship with content creators demonstrated how technology could disrupt entire industries faster than regulations could adapt. Perhaps most significantly, Kazaa showed how a technology that promised freedom and democratization could quickly become a vector for exploitation and abuse. The promise of free content masked a business model built on spyware, advertising fraud, and user exploitation that would become disturbingly familiar in the social media age. Today, as we grapple with the hidden costs of free platforms that monetize user data and attention, Kazaa seems less like a relic of internet history and more like a preview of the digital economy's future. The peer-to-peer revolution it helped start ultimately succeeded, but informs that its creators never intended and users never wanted.